Hello, everybody. This is just a little extra recording because Carol and myself are just back from Roselawn Crematorium. We've just sadly conducted the funeral of David Heatley, who many of you will know from the 9:30 communion service. And we had the service in James Brown Funeral Home. Carol and myself, again, both took part. Carol led the service and I gave the tribute and preached. Just a very short service. There wasn't any hymns or any music at all. And again, just with numbers limited, it was only the immediate family that were there. We then went up to Roselawn Crematorium. And again, slightly strange there now in that you conduct the service at the door and then you watch the coffin being taken inside on a big screen and being taken down from there. But it was lovely just to remember David and pay tribute to him and just to share really a little bit about his life with you now, for those of you who weren't able to be at the funeral and were fond of David and want to remember him. He was basically evacuated, his family were anyway, as David was born, and moved to Glengormley and then to Carrick. And David in his early years went to school at Annandale, where he played football and rugby. His one regret was leaving school a year early because the school rugby team won the cup the year that he left, and he wished it out that he'd kind of stayed on for that. But he did leave school and go into the wholesale business. And from then, a few years later, he then set up his own stationery business and really worked as a businessman all of his life. He met Sylvia at a dance in the Orchid Ballroom, and they very quickly got engaged. But again, the day of his engagement party was quite interesting because basically he broke his foot playing rugby that day. No, sorry, playing football it was. And had to go to the hospital and actually turned up at his engagement party in an ambulance, which was quite interesting for everybody watching. And David and Sylvia were married in 1965 in Springfield Methodist Church. They lived in Skegneel for 2 years, and then they got the house in Merville Garden Village, which was to remain their family home for well over 50 years. And again, all the rest of David's life. They had 2 children, David and then Louise, and then eventually four grandchildren as well. And David's great love throughout his life was sports. He played football and rugby in his younger days, and then he took up golf. But he was also a champion bowler. He actually won the British Championship in 1978 when he was with the York Road Bowling Club, and then later in 1989 with the Cliftonville Bowling Club. And he also, of course, loved just watching sport. He used to support Ulster and go down when he could, and he'd watch them on the television as well. And it was lovely as part of the funeral because Carla, his granddaughter, again gave a little tribute to David, reading a poem that she'd written, which really talked about his personality and also his great love for sport. I only knew David for under 2 years, actually, but you always used to enjoy talking to him at the back of church in that back pew where they used to sit. And we'd kind of dissect the rugby games the night before. And he was either happy if Ulster had won or critical if they hadn't. But we'd always chat about that and rugby league as well, which I used to enjoy. He was very, very knowledgeable, really, about sport. And again, David was very involved with 2 churches, really. That him and Sylvia went to St. Paul's in their early years of marriage before joining us at Carnmoney when Louise, I think, was a teenager. But really, I guess, his family were all very important to him. Him and Sylvia were devoted. They had well over 50 years of marriage, which was an amazing achievement. And he loved his grandchildren, Carla and Aaron, and then Owen and Kane as well. And again, I remember David very much as a courteous, quiet man. He was apparently very opinionated as well. He always thought he was right. He had an opinion on most things. But he also was polite to people, courteous. He'd always listen to their views because he really just wanted to learn from them so that he could get all those facts right in his head. And he had a really fit and healthy life. He was very rarely ill. He had a stroke 7 years ago, but he recovered well from that. But just a couple of years ago, he had some problems with an ingrowing toenail, and he developed sepsis as well in that leg. And really, he was never right for those last 2 years of his life. He had to keep going into hospital occasionally and really just grew weaker and weaker. And again, about 2 weekends ago, he had a couple of falls in the house there and was taken into hospital again and really died very quickly in hospital. He was taken in on the Monday and he died there in the Royal Hospital on Tuesday morning. So we remember David again with great affection. I certainly had only 2 years, and I know Carol would say the same. It was a real privilege to know David. And it's good just to remember him. But I would just ask you to remember the family in your prayers. Please just pray for Sylvia. Pray for his 2 children, David and Louise. And also the 4 grandchildren, Carla and Aaron and Owen and Kane. Again, the oldest 3 were there. Kane is still in London. Louise is staying over here with her mum now until Sunday. But that was David, and hopefully that's helped you just to remember his life as we thank God for him. And we commit him into the care of God now. We read those words from John 14, very famous words, "In my Father's house there are many rooms." And again, we trust that David is now safe in the arms of Jesus, as that lovely hymn says, in that place where there's no more suffering and no more pain.